Connecting. All right, now we're live. So if you refresh the page, you should see. Sweet. You see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's wait for the viewers to roll in. It's a little bit slow updating. I think they only check every few seconds. So how's the new design coming along? I know you guys have the UI guy.
Oh man, he did some great work this week. He's got a, we've been working on a little like Pi F ligature.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to get it to work with other designers, 4 or 5 months ago, and didn't get anything that we liked. But he's got something really good, so we're really excited. He's doing a really good job.
Yeah, I can't wait to I don't know how he's gonna set it up, but when we plop the videos in there, it's gonna be sweet. The challenge. I was interviewing Mike, and Mike is a little bit difficult. He gives very blunt answers,
technical.
and I have to make it exciting, and his cadences. But I think I have some plans, like with some music and like with some cuts. It'll be fun. What's up, guys? So we have 6 viewers right now. We're doing good. So this is going to be kind of like an interview for me and for you. So if you have any questions about cryptocurrencies, blockchain, Google, I guess Oracle. I mean, you only named Google and Oracle from what I can remember. But you also worked at that one place when the internet was the very first, or one of the top 4 places. What was it called?
Sunsight
That.
at UNC. Yeah, this is back when like the internet was mostly Gopher and FTP, right?
Yep.
We were I think we were one of the first 10 websites in the world.
Wow.
So this being top 5 wasn't saying much.
What was the year?
Let's see. This was when I was 19, so it would have been about 94.
Okay. Yeah, so I was 4 years old. So you're definitely probably one of the first websites.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely one of the first.
Would you just host that on like dial-up? How expensive was that?
Well, Sun Microsystems, which is a microcomputer manufacturer that doesn't exist anymore, they gave us a bunch of hardware at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and we took their hardware and we built a bunch of websites and FTP sites. And in particular, what made us most that popular at that time was we hosted most of the Linux downloads. So we hosted archives for the kernel, we hosted Red Hat and things like that, and there were a number of Linux-related projects that came out of North Carolina in the 90s, and Sunsight was used as a distribution mechanism for those. So that really helped our download numbers. We would get 100,000 or so downloads a month, which, back in 1994, that was a lot. That was like a huge amount. Now that's like a moderately successful YouTube video.
Yeah. So you have one question would be like, how would you prepare for Google today? What would you do?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I think that the main thing is you've got to really understand computer science at a fairly reasonable level, right? So you don't necessarily have to know everything, but you have to understand sort of the basic structure of how everything works, right? You want to understand data structures, you want to understand a little graph theory, you want to understand some algorithms, some analysis, how Big O works. You don't want to get confused by any of the core questions that people are going to ask you in an interview. So you've got to be prepared for for those kinds of questions to come up, and that's what I would do. I don't know that I would necessarily try to study anything in particular, but obviously if you're going to study something, trees are a big deal. Search trees are a huge thing for, obviously it's a search company, right? So they're going to ask you a lot of questions about search trees, binary trees, n-ary trees, red-black trees, stuff like that. Those are all great, data structures to look up. And if you can speak intelligently about any of those, then you're going to be in a position to, to start answering other kinds of questions intelligently as well.
Okay. What about if you could pick a couple languages that Google looks for, like obviously JavaScript is probably one of them, but what backend languages do you think you would need?
Well, I think in general, Google publishes a list of languages that they support, right? So C++, Java are sort of like the two big enterprise object-oriented languages. They also have Go. Python is a big deal at Google, although backends are not typically written in Python. A lot of glue code is written in Python, that kind of thing. But yeah, I would say, look, if you understand how C++ works and you can write a couple of templates, and you understand how Java works and you can do dependency injection there, and you understand a little bit about how Go works and you can talk about the threading model, then not like you've nailed sort of the core stuff that I think most developers need to know to be able to speak intelligently about what Google does on the programming language side. So those would be the three that I would focus on. So
they want to know your educational background.
Oh, that's a good question. So I started as an undergraduate at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I did 3.5 years there. That was from about 1993 to about 1998, 99. I forget exactly which. Got about 3.5 years in. The internet bubble was like going nuts, so I decided to take my chances in the professional field. I dropped out. I went out. I spent a lot of time building networks for people, installing routers, firewalls, stuff like that. I learned probably more between the time that I left Carolina and the time that I went back to school. I went back to school at George Mason probably about 10 or 15 years later. I forget exactly what it was. When I went to George Mason, I just sort of walked on into the math department's grad school, and I spent a fair amount of time, a couple of years, studying computation and theory of computation at George Mason. And I did that for a couple of years. They got to the point where they were sort of harassing me to join their PhD program. I didn't really want to do that, to be completely frank. I liked taking the classes. I didn't really want to have to worry about a degree.
I think you just changed a lot of people's lives with that statement.
Yeah. Well, look, this is, if there's one thing that I could tell people, right, it would be this. The education is important, but the degree in this industry, I don't think the degree is all that important at all, right? It's important to be able to demonstrate that you know what you're doing, but there are a lot of ways to do that, right? And, some of what you're doing, I wasn't fully aware of everything that you've been up to in terms of code camp at different schools and helping people out and that kind of thing. And so I think there's some utility in getting credentials outside of university. But I'll tell you, we don't look that hard at exactly what degrees you have when we're hiring. What we look at is what you're interested in and what you're passionate about and what you're, sorry about that. What your specific interests are, what you're willing to put time into, right? Because what we've discovered is that at the end of the day, the thing that matters is what people put time into, right? It's like what was that? God, who was that? The guy that wrote the book about 10,000 hours, right? He wrote this book that basically said you can become expert in anything if you put 10,000 hours into it, right? And
is that Cal Newport?
I don't know. Sorry?
Is that Cal Newport? I know he talks about it in his Deep Work book, but yeah, go on.
No. Hold on. Let me just look it up. It's Malcolm Gladwell, right?
Yep. Okay.
So whether or not you believe what Gladwell had to say about 10,000 hours or not, it's sort of secondary, right? The point is, 10,000 hours is 5 years of full-time work, right? So anybody that's willing to put in 5 years of full-time work in a particular thing is going to learn a significant amount in that 5 years, right? So what we look for is people who have committed time that they didn't have to, at exceptional levels towards a skill that we care about, right? There are a lot of people who will sort of go through the motions, go through college, get the degree, and they come out, you talk to them, and they're not passionate about anything that they learn, right? Whereas there are also a lot of people that you'll talk to, and they'll be like, well, I went to school and I spent a bunch of time doing this and this, but they wouldn't let me do the projects I really wanted to do, so I dropped out and I invented like a new kind of laser, and then I used that to make laser shows for my favorite bands. And I get a guy like that on the phone, and I'm like, come into my office and interview, because I want to know like what's up with your laser project. Right? Like, I just we don't necessarily hire everybody who's like that, because the things that they're passionate about aren't perfect. They may not be perfect matches for what we're up to, but we're really excited to see people who are deeply passionate about technical stuff, regardless of what it is, because it demonstrates, I think, that they have a interest and an ability to to focus, to find something exciting, and then to get really, really interested in it and work really hard on it.
Cool. So we have a couple more questions that passed over. One person wants to know how much math you need to know to get into Google, and then how did you master analytical and design aspects? And then there's one more. We'll talk about like ageism, I guess, if you want to address that at some point. Like, does age matter? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Hit me the first question again.
Okay, so how much math do you need to work at Google?
I would say that you need to have enough calculus that you can get through the initial graduate textbook in algorithms, right? So typically when you take your first graduate class in algorithms, what you're going to learn is like big O notation, how to bound the performance of algorithms. You're going to learn what the upper bounds, the lower bounds, the different notations for those. There's going to be some differential equations associated with that, and you're going to need to be able to look at a computer algorithm and then specify like the big O notation limits for this algorithm are thus, right? So it does require some algebra, some calculus. I think beyond that, you're probably okay. Like, you probably don't have to get into a ton of other math. Graph theory always helps, right? Data structures are generally graphs some kind, and so it's useful to have some graph theory, but you don't have to have super advanced math. I think you just have to be committed to understanding how computer algorithms work. That's the main thing. Yeah. What was the next question?
How did you master? It was kind of a vague question that we got. How did you master design and analytical aspects? Any advice? I'm not sure how to interpret that, but maybe they mean like data science. I don't know.
No, it's a good question, actually. Design is I think, an interesting area because it combines aesthetics and the intuitions that are associated with having an aesthetic understanding of what's going on in the system with the specific, technical knowledge that you can, understand what your aesthetic choices are implying, right? So I think that the main thing is to start with a good foundation, be educated about what you're designing, and then, you can extend it to sort of, as you develop your specific knowledge, your intuitions about what looks good will start to, develop in a way that allows you to design things that you can, view as being attractive, right? So, if you're doing a large-scale search index of some kind, then, people will take a look at it. They'll be like, if it's not the right kind of tree, they'll say, look, something looks funky here. Like, it's not going to perform well in production. And so you're going to, they're going to want to fiddle with it until it looks like it's going to perform well. Well, what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for certain tree characteristics and certain IO patterns, that kind of thing. And you sort of have to develop an instinct for that over time. There's no magic to it. I think it works the same in computer science as it works for, as it works in any field like architecture or graphic design or whatever. You just have to develop technical facility, and then combine that with a sense of aesthetic appreciation.
Okay, so then we have one question about age in the industry. Does that matter to you? Have you seen? I mean, would you hire someone older or younger? Do you put preference on that at all?
No, we don't. I mean,
Have you seen
we
it?
have. I'm, I've got gray in my beard, but I'm certainly not the oldest guy at Pyrofex. Uh, we don't care much about age. We care about your ability and your passion and your willingness to work hard. Um, I think that one of the things that's an advantage for younger guys is that they can often put more time and energy into projects, and they have less responsibilities. But by the time that you're older and you have sort of more responsibility and you know you've got family issues, you've got whatever. You've often developed techniques that help you make sure that your projects are getting done correctly anyway, right? So there's a nice trade-off between sort of the energy of youth and the experience of age, and we just think as a result of that we don't have to attend to that particular factor at all, right? We'll hire anybody who can speak our language and can help us get our projects done.
So how do you differentiate between proven passion over years of experience? Like who would win out? The guy who's real excited but doesn't necessarily know how to get to A to B but is really excited to get there, or the guy that's been doing it for a while? How do you evaluate that?
Oh, well, in general, I think I would take passion and excitement over experience, just because there's a relatively large number of people who have plenty of experience but have never had any passion, right? So, you know, we want people who really care about software. They really care about quality. They care about developing software that's useful. They've been in the industry for however long because they love it, right? Not because it's what we don't want is a guy who's just punching a clock, essentially, making time, right? And so, yeah, I think years of experience are relevant, and we definitely take a look at that when we hire people. But honestly, like that matters more in terms of understanding like where somebody is in terms of compensation and in terms of what responsibilities that they can handle, right? One of the things to keep in mind is that if you're brand new, you can be very, very useful, but the kinds of things that you can do, they may be more limited than somebody who's very similar to you but's been in the industry for 15 or 20 years, right? Just because after 15 or 20 years, right, you've got an understanding of like how projects are managed, how specifications get written, what kinds of things need to be done in order to make sure that a project delivers on time, how you establish a project cadence. These are all things that matter a lot to getting projects done. They don't necessarily matter to whether or not you're writing great code, right? So they're sort of ancillary signals or ancillary skills that you can add over time. And guys with more experience, they have a lot of that. Guys with less experience, they have less of that. We look at sort of all of those factors when we're hiring, but we think that overall, what we're really looking for is people who are, really passionate, willing to work really hard, excited about our project. We find those people at all kinds of ages. So we don't really have to think too much about age as a factor when we're hiring.
Cool.
Do other Silicon Valley companies consider age? Man, I honestly, I kind of hope not. It's a bad deal for them if they do. I think the reality is that probably there's a lot of look, I mean, guys that are younger make less. The guys that are older with the same skills, just because of experience, that's the reality. So I think there's an advantage to being younger if you're just generically trying to get hired by Silicon Valley. I don't like it, but it is, I think, the way that it is, right?
Okay, so Chris Sean says that's an amazing answer, and he thanks for that. Also, Victor says thanks for that answer. So that was a really good answer. We have one other question from Chris Simmons. The actual question is, what are 5 distinct qualities that help someone get promoted in your company? But you don't have to give 5. What are things that you look for?
All right, let's count down.
Okay.
let's see. I want somebody who's passionate and determined when it comes to computing. And find something. Give me something that's relevant to what we do. Show me that you're excited and passionate about it. Number two, you show me an open mind, right? Like I want to be able to when guys come into my office, right? Like I want to be able to have a conversation with them. That's important to me when I interview them. It's important to me when I'm an executive. That's really important. I would say, and an interesting fact is that I think that a lot of people who are successful with us and are successful with companies that are similar to ours have a broad variety of interests, right? So I'm always looking for other things that aren't professionally relevant, but that they're interested in and excited about, that are relevant. Demonstrate that they're out there doing stuff because they love it and not doing stuff because it's what's demanded of them or because they feel like it's checking something off on a checklist. Two more. Well, our office is getting very crowded, so you have to be willing to work in a fairly compact environment these days. So, and then I think that I suppose that the fifth one would be vision for the future, right? Like some people, and this just varies from person to person, right? But some people would like a regular paycheck, would really like to have a job that's just very reliable, where they don't have to worry. They can show up every day. They can come in at 9:30. They can leave at 4:30. Take 30 minutes for lunch. It's just very stable. They're going to get paid. They're going to get their raise. They know exactly what's going to happen. That's the way some people look at the job market, and that's what they're looking for. And other people are looking for projects that make a difference, right? And so one of the things that we really look for is we really look for people who are excited by the idea of making a difference and working on projects that are really cool. And it's amazing because you can tell this comes through in spades in interviews, right? Like people can't, when they're excited about what you're doing, they cannot hide it. And when they're not excited, they can't hide that either. So this is actually a fairly good differentiator between people who are going to be a nice fit and people who aren't, because it comes through so clearly when we're talking to them in interviews.
Okay, so we got, everyone says I love what this guy stands for, the people. Behind every value he says, that's because he's the people CEO. That's how it works.
It's like I've told you this before, right? I am trying to build the company that I always wanted to work for. I was an engineer for 25 years, and I never got to work for a company where I was like, this is the company I was always meant to work for. And so when you start your own company, like what's a better place to start than going, I want to build the company that I always wanted to get to work for and never did. And so if that means that I'm, sound like I'm, for the engineers, for the people, great. Like I'm all about that. That's great.
So we had one question. I'll come back to it because it was about the blockchain, and since that's your entire company, I'll put that for later because I'm sure that has a very long answer. So let me ask you a different question. How is the diversity like in your office? Sabrina Lindsay says, you say men, guys a lot, but she is trying to switch into the tech industry. How's Pyrofix? Like when I'm in the office, there's quite a few. I know it's no big deal there.
Yeah. I mean, we try really hard to, make sure that we bring in anybody that's talented that we can. We simply don't have the option to consider any of that stuff when we're hiring because we're so desperate for talent. So if you're talented and you're a woman or we don't care, right? We're just interviewing people to find out if they can do the job, and we bring them in, and if they can do the job, great. So I would say that in general, my experience with hiring managers in Silicon Valley is that many of them are desperate to hire women and minorities, and so it is definitely something that's doable. If that's your position, you should be able to break into that. It's not something that we have to worry too much about in terms of, thinking about it in our hiring process, because we focus really heavily on the technical aspects. And so far, we've been very lucky. I don't know off the top of my head how many the people in the office. I suppose it's 30% of our Orem office is women. Diversity in Utah. Let's be realistic, but we do our best.
Yeah, I think in general there's just a smaller pool of women applying to tech jobs. Therefore, there's usually smaller amounts inside the offices. And especially it just depends on what you're applying to. So it's all about like who can do the job. I don't care what you look like or what gender you are. Just can you get it done? Great, fantastic.
I think that's exactly right. I believe every technical hiring manager I've ever worked for has gone out of their way to try to find women and minority candidates that are qualified for their positions. And so if you're a woman or a minority and you're worried about breaking into the industry, don't. Just do your work, study what you need to study, find a niche that you're passionate about, and go for it, because you're going to succeed. It's going to happen.
Yep. One person asked earlier, Happy Turtle asked, did you ever compete at any internal contests at Google, like machine learning or anything like that?
No.
Okay, that was.
I was kind of too busy doing actual work.
Let's see. I could combine these two questions together. How do you kind of nurture creativity in your team, and then how do you manage employees that aren't fulfilling their potential? How do you push them? So how do you hold them accountable? How do you keep them motivated? And I don't know, because you operate a very autonomous office, you give people a lot of trust and you expect good work from that. But if they don't, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how you do it, right? I mean, if you give, I like to say I like to draw boxes around problems and then give those problems to smart people. Say, go solve this problem, and when you do, I'm going to be delighted about the result, right? So the trick for me is to draw a box as crisply as I can, and then hold people to the standards. So, people who are doing well, they demonstrate it by succeeding. They demonstrate it by, solving the problem inside the box that I've described. And people who are struggling, you often give them a problem and they either don't solve it, or they don't solve it thoroughly, or, they're slow, what have you. And at the end of the day, you push them sort of the same way, honestly, like your baseball or soccer coach or whomever pushed you. You've got to call them on it. You've got to say, hey, this is what I expected. This is what you delivered. That's not good enough. And the reality is that sometimes that's just the answer. Sometimes what people can produce isn't good enough. And you can't do anything about that. But what you have to realize, and I think the most important thing to realize about holding people accountable, is that you're not doing it for yourself. And you're not doing it for the person that you're holding accountable. You're doing it for everyone else in the organization, right? So if you've got a team of 10 guys and one of them is really weak, you're not holding him accountable because you're worried about him or you're worried about yourself. It's that you're worried about the other 9 guys who are having to pick up the slack, right? And every one of those 9 guys, people, whatever, they expect you to keep the standard up, right? That's why they joined your company. That's why they're excited to be where they are. They want to make sure that everybody on their team is strong. And so, the trick is just to do it, right? So, not to be afraid, and to recognize that it's part of what it means to be a leader is to hold people accountable when they don't perform.
Yep. I saw a couple more. Are there any part-time people, besides contractors, at PyroFX?
Yeah, we have a handful of part-time folks doing different things. It varies depending upon the role. We have some guys doing research. We have number of contractors in various places. Some of them, work part-time. So yeah, I mean, We definitely are open to hiring the right kind of people on a part-time basis. I mean, I'll tell you, the thing about part-time is that it really depends on your project, right? If there are projects that can benefit from part-time work, then great. If somebody's, when we're hiring for a specific project where we need to build a team, that team needs to gel and they need to deliver over the course of a year, 18 months, maybe 2 years. It's real hard to find, it's real hard to find a way to hire part-time people. You really want, you really want full-time engineers, because that gelling process doesn't happen that quickly, and it's surprising how much time out of every week it really takes to gel a team.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm trying to run out of questions. Well, I mean, they want to know how old you are. I mean, maybe I don't know. I'm not
42.
See, that's why I'm not guessing. So I'd like it to never want it. So get an answer. Just joined. Who is he? He is a blockchain CEO for Pyrofx. He's making the software that our chain will run on. Our chain, or what will it be called? It's still going to be called our chain, right? So then
we employ the vast majority of the full-time developers for the Archain blockchain project, which is funded and run by the Archain Cooperative. We have 18 devs or something like that are full-time on that project right now. It's written in Scala. It's a proof-of-stake blockchain that it's a smart contracting blockchain similar to Ethereum. It's gonna be a sharded blockchain, and we're targeting performance that's competitive with the large-scale financial network that are out there today. So Visa, Discover, whatever. We want to be competitive with Ghost guys in terms of transactions per second, while at the same time offering a secure and easy to use mechanism for writing smart contracts that allow people to build the applications on top of the blockchain that they're interested in building. Right? We haven't seen what blockchain can really do yet, because there simply isn't one out there that's fast enough to meet everyone's needs. So we intend to fix that.
Yeah, so I think Ethereum only does a few thousand per second, and our chain's aiming at like 40.
Ethereum does 15.
15,000 per second?
No, 15 per second.
Oh, all right. So you're aiming for 40,000 transactions per second, and because it's really scalable, you can so it's an Ethereum competitor, but hugely scalable with, you can write your own contracts, have your own applications, but now we're getting more questions here. Are you going to target payment systems like Dash?
Payment systems are part of what we want to target. Obviously, that's one application. We think the large opportunity is in various forms of financialized, decentralized applications. That could be anything from a smart contract that manages a trading market, like say Oasis Dex, to a music application like Resonate, to something that's measuring provenance of individual like high value items like paintings or jewelry, what have you. There's a variety of different blockchain applications that are viable out there, and our chain is intending to support all of those. At the low level, that involves a payment network, because you can't financialize high level applications till you have payments. So that's we're going to try to compete in all those areas.
Okay. Now we're getting a bunch of blockchain questions, so that's good. Does the concept of querying a blockchain database exist like a relational database? Not sure what that means. Maybe you know better.
Yeah, actually that's a pretty good question, right? So a relational database, if you don't have any inserts coming into it, right, and a relational database is static. You query it, you get current data as it stands today. The thing about a blockchain that's different is it has a notion of what happened in the past, right? So a blockchain is more like a relational database plus all the transaction logs integrated together. And so the notion of querying it isn't really, there's no real notion of like a SQL for blockchain, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe in the near future. We'll see.
I have a question, besides questions from chat. Like, what are some like practical applications for blockchain right now, besides like the financial sector and people moving money, and besides CryptoKitties? Like... some fun things that people might be aware of.
That one's so practical, right?
I know.
I'll give you the example of what I think is one of the most interesting potential applications for blockchain today, right? So, uh, you're a gamer, I'm a gamer, played games online. We've all, played games where you've got to like pay to purchase, say, loot boxes or items or whatever, and then you put the money into the game system, and there's no way to then transfer the value that you've created inside of one game into another game, right? So maybe you've spent a lot of time building characters in World of Warcraft, and then you get into some other MMO like the Star Wars one. I forget what the latest Star Wars one was called, but you've got all these assets built up in this one game, and you want to get something over into another game so you can sort of build up there as well, right? Today, all of these multiplayer game systems, the internal economies are disconnected from each other and managed by the single just the developer, right? They're not managed. There's no third party, or there's no third party systems that you can use to exchange economic value. But the blockchain offers an opportunity for that to change, where the game developers could use a cryptocurrency and a set of smart contracts to implement all the in-game functionality that they need, and then the underlying cryptocurrency could be fungible across game environments. So if you've got a bunch of items in World of Warcraft, you could sell them off, to build a pile of cryptocurrency, move it over to another game, buy a bunch of items, and get going in that environment more rapidly. Personally, I think this is a really exciting application because it has the opportunity to allow audiences to move from game to game based on what they're really interested in at the time, as opposed to sort of being locked in based on what they've done in the past.
So wouldn't that mean that a bunch of companies would have to adopt the same currency, and then a bunch of people would fight for that market?
What you mean, like, dollars?
They'd all have to like adopt like the WoW coin or something, unless you would go trade that on the market for some other coin like that.
Sure, but they do that today in dollars.
Right.
Right. The difference is the dollars aren't financialized on the blockchain, so the ability to do anything other than like pay with your credit card and then desperately ask for a refund is fairly limited. You put your dollars in, you never get them back out. So on the blockchain, we can do more than that. We can offer you more features than that. So my feeling is the game companies are gonna go this direction, because what choice do they have in the long run?
Right. All right. I had a few more questions. I'll back up a little bit. How often does blockchain get targeted by hackers? What are they normally going after besides funds, I suppose?
It gets targeted constantly. It is a constant. It's just a constant battle with those guys. And yeah, they're going after funds. I mean, they're always interested in, can they capture money directly out of your wallet? But they're also often just trying to change the behavior of the blockchain in a way that changes what users expect, so that maybe payments get delayed in such a way that it's advantageous for a hacker, or maybe one good example is that there's a group of guys. I call it a group of guys. I don't know who these people are, right? But there's a group of hackers that attack the ether to gas exchange market, right? So when the price of gas is very low, they'll play funny games to sort of consume gas, and when the price is very high, then they'll take their returns, and so they're arbitraging the prices of these exchange markets on a continuous basis, even when the users are not paying any attention. So when you financialize assets, like, you got to remember, right now, all of a sudden, everything that was a hack before, buffer overflows, bad passwords, cross-site scripting, like impersonation of other websites, like, these are all now attacks in the blockchain. But we've got a whole new set of attacks that look like all the old classic financial schemes. We've got Ponzi schemes. We've got pump and dumps. We've got, arbitrage, like that creators markets. And, all of these things are now, quote, hacks that you can launch on the blockchain just as effectively as you could, launch a buffer overflow. So those are all now things that we have to pay attention to as security threats, and so we do.
Okay. There's an Agile question. Like, I don't think do you guys use sprints and Agile there? I'm not sure.
We do. Well, it's an interesting question as to what what Agile sort of means and how effective it is. Here's what I'll say. At the end of the day, what I encourage a corporate culture of writing things down, and not a corporate culture of talking things out. Because when you write things down, people can comment, they can discuss them on mailing lists, they can see what was written in the past, they can see what's written now, they can see how it's changed, they can look at histories of those changes, that kind of thing. One of the things that I don't like about Agile is the way that it encourages people to orient towards talking about issues rather than writing down issues. I think that undermines software development as a process, and I think that it causes dev teams to get distracted by needing to get verbal consensus on issues rather than focusing on the technical details of problems. So we do use sprints, we do use stand-ups and various other aspects of the Agile. Well, so really like sprints and stand-ups and that kind of stuff, those are more Scrum techniques, right? Agile is sort of a manifesto that says your software engineering should be oriented around features that the customer can use right now. You should try to take a piece of software from zero to something that works, even if it's minimal and doesn't satisfy, as quickly as you can, and then incrementally build towards a release. And that there's nothing controversial about that, right? So if you go look up the Agile Manifesto and you read it, I agree with 100% of that. Whether or not the Scrum process is the right process to use can depend a lot from company to company, and just sort of depends on how your managers want to, and that sort of thing.
Right. There's one question about, like, how do you feel about tech culture as of today? Is it better than ever to pursue a career in this industry? Like, I can answer at first.
Go for it.
What I always say is, like, in the future, there's a lot of jobs that are going to be automated. Waitresses are going to be automated. Stores are going to be automated. You're either going to be the person that's writing the software, automating it, or you're going to be the person looking for a job. And that's like that's a generic answer, but that's the way we're headed. So I think right now is you'd get in early, so to speak. I mean, you can answer too.
It's a great answer.
So you either be the person doing the automating or get automated by a robot. That's it. So that would be my 2 cents on that. Let's see. Oh, one person wanted to know, like, what L level you got to in Google. L2, 9. Have you ever worked with L8 or 9 engineers? I don't know what that means.
Oh man, I forget what the L levels were. I got to the one below staff. I'm not sure what that is. 5 or 6. I've worked with L8s and 9s, sure.
Okay. Let's see. Talk about the work culture there. Is it beautiful? That's what people are saying.
Pyrofex? Is it beautiful? I don't know. I mean, I tell you, here's what I know. It's like, I have really enjoyed over the last few months watching our office fill up and watching the traffic on our Discord grow, and watching the kinds of interactions that are starting to occur between people. When look, when we moved into this office in October, it was me and Mike.
And there was what was his name? He's over there, and he's coding in the office, like, directly on the other side from you. It was you two. You were eating sandwiches. Yeah. And at the table, and then...
Yeah. So it was, I guess, when you and I met, it was me and Mike. And there were 3 of us in this 2,500 square foot office, and now there's almost 20. And we're going to have to, move to a much larger office. And, I don't know whether it's beautiful to anybody else or not, but I really enjoy watching the people that I've brought together work with each other and find pleasure in each other's talents and abilities, and the specific character of each individual person, their sense of humor. We've had some teams that gel really well, where I'm really impressed, and we've had some people that come on who are just incredibly talented, and that stuff is a lot of fun to watch. And so yeah, I mean, that stuff is beautiful to me.
So I have a question. This is just something that I'm interested in. I don't know if we have, like, a lot of business folks here, or like entrepreneur people that are interested in, like, new startups, and I think a lot of people might think that it'd be super cool to be the CEO of a startup and have their own company and stuff. So my question would be like, what is the best thing about being CEO at your own startup? And then what is the worst thing about it?
I mean, look, it changes all the time, right? So at the end of the day, the thing about being, in charge of your own company, is that's I think most attractive to me was, finding a co-founder that I really gelled with, that could see the vision that I had, that was willing to really commit to working on it, that put their, everything they had behind it, and then being able to build something successful. It's incredibly gratifying. We've only been in business about a little bit less than 2.5 years, and we're profitable, and we have 30 folks on our team, and we're building incredible software. We have a ton of great projects, so people are really thrilled to work with us and all that kind of stuff. And that's insanely gratifying. Like, nothing could really beat that in terms of just personal satisfaction for being able to have helped to build that. Like, let's be honest, the worst thing about it is the hours. Like, when you're the CEO, when you're in charge and everything's sort of like the buck stops on your desk, like, you don't get to leave working during the day until your desk is clear of stuff, right? You simply don't have the opportunity to say, if I'm late on this, what skin is it off my back, right? Because not only is it skin off your back, but it's skin off the back of everybody that's committed to your team, right? They're all depending upon you to deliver what you do in order to make it possible for them to do what they do and to do it really well. And so the amount of work is just preposterous, right? Like, it never stops.
Okay, so I'm a nerd. I'm always reading books, and I'm always like, CEOs read an average of 1 book a week. Is that true? How many books do you read a week or listen to?
I think that is probably a fairly reasonable estimate if you're in 1995, when the only way you could acquire new information is books. I would say that in general these days I get much more information on a weekly basis from YouTube and podcasts and things like that than I do from reading books. And I probably listen to between 40 and 50 hours of podcasts and interviews and lectures on YouTube, direct downloads, stuff like that, every week. So yeah, I when 20 years ago, I was definitely reading, a book a week.
Yeah, but you've already consumed a bunch of information in your time, right? I'm like at that lower level. I'm still trying to like get up to your level. So I'm trying to do a book a week, if not 2 books a week. I don't know. Every moment that I'm not actively listening to something, I try to substitute that with a book, unless it's just like walking.
Well, it's very much like what I said before, right? About college is the education is important, not the degree, right? So the thing that's important, and the reason that people read, that people read that much is because
that's the warning that they're about to lock the door.
Yeah, my lights are about to shut off. So in a second, like, everything is going to turn about. Corporate energy savings in my office. Don't read the books just to read the books. Read the books because you want to know what's in them. Right? That's the most important thing. So, if you have to read books you're not very interested in to develop the habit of reading books and understanding what's in them and internalizing it, great. But don't learn that skill just so that you can then turn around and read books you don't care about. Learn that skill because you want to be great at learning new things, absorbing new information, and adding to the skills that are really important to you, right? And then put it in a life context, right? Like, you've got, maybe say 60. Oh, hold on just a second.
I'll ask him the question with the podcasts, YouTube channels, and what he does after work, and then I'll ask him about the pen test. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm back. You've got maybe like 60 years, to put in. Like, if you start when you're in your mid-teens and you go until you're, 75, you've got, maybe 60 years of work to put into your life, and you kind of get to choose, more or less the direction that work goes. I don't think that at any point in time you can be very specific about what you're trying to get out of those 60 years. But I'll tell you, if you're interested in technology, it really helps to be educated about a variety of different things. Uh, I, for example, I personally have always had a really deep interest in finance and economics. And as a blockchain CEO, all of a sudden, that esoteric stuff that I spent time learning about 15, 20 years ago is showing up as really valuable knowledge that I can contribute to conversations. At no point in the previous 15 years was it ever useful as a skill, right? And all of a sudden now algorithms are not just algorithms, but they create economic incentives, and you have to be able to balance those, and there has to be a fairly solid understanding of what it means to balance incentives. And so all the books and all the stuff that I learned about economics, all of a sudden it's really useful. I couldn't have anticipated that when I read the books. So that's what I would say is get good at reading books, or get good at acquiring new information, and then use it to acquire information that you find interesting, and trust that the universe is going to put problems in front of you that you find fascinating.
Okay, so we had one couple of tech questions, like how do you protect your network? Do you do like penetration tests? Would you be interested in a tool that tests that, or do you already do that internally?
For our chain, we're working on launching a testnet at the beginning of September. Anybody that's interested in that should go to developer.ourchain.coop and click on events or conference, and they can learn all about the conference that we're doing in Berlin in September, where we're going to launch testnet. Anybody that wants to help us test testnet, in particular on the security side, love to hear from you. We have a variety of different things in flight. I was a security professional a long time ago. I don't tend to like to talk too much about this stuff. So just will say, we work hard to make sure that everything we do is secure. Nobody's perfect, but we try.
Right. Okay. So then we had a couple outside development questions. What podcast do you listen to or recommend, and what are your favorite YouTube channels?
Oh, God, I honestly couldn't tell you how many YouTube channels that I'm subscribed to at this point. What I do on YouTube is I search for a lot of lectures, right? So I grind through a lot of university channels on YouTube, looking for lectures that are interesting about topics that I find interesting. That doesn't really lead to a good subscription listing, to be completely frank. Probably my favorite economics podcast is Macro Voices. Anybody that's interested in finance and economics should listen to Macro Voices. It comes out once a week. It's the best reporting on finance and economics that I've ever encountered in my life, and I highly recommend it. It's not. I don't think it's on. Actually, that's not true. I think they do publish their stuff on YouTube. But I would say, look, the reality. Oh, one other one that I love that I recommend, but they don't come out very often, is Hardcore History.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that one?
Oh yeah, that one's good. They're long, but they're so full of quality.
The one on World War I just really rocked my world. I'd never heard anybody describe it that way. It's put the whole thing into a perspective that I never could have imagined for myself. But I would say in general, there's so many high quality podcasts out there. There's so much stuff out there. If you have an interest, figure out what your interest is and go dig for the content that people are making about your interest. And you know what? If you don't find any, make your own.
Exactly. And what are you doing outside of work?
For the last year, I have really done very little.
Well, when you do leave the office, what are you doing? I know you have a family.
I do. I have 2 kids. They're lovely. So I spend a fair amount of time hanging out with my kids. My son is super into video games, so he and I like to play Fortnite together, or whatever is popular at that point. My daughter is getting interested in business, so she asks me a lot of questions about that. She's a lot of fun to talk to. I mow my lawn. I play a little golf. I've got a '69 Pontiac that I futz around with, right? I just have some hobbies that I do and some chores that I do. Other than that, right now, what I'm trying to do is build a successful company, get it off the ground, and get it to the point where I'm not working 80 hours a week.
That's fair enough. Let's see. Have you seen any questions that you want to answer? I'm just kind of scrolling through here.
Yeah, me too.
I'm really surprised that you didn't say my YouTube channel was on your YouTube favorites list, though.
Your YouTube channel is totally no, you are totally in my subscriber list, Ombre.
Oh boy, great! I didn't know that.
How do you think I found your last live stream?
You know, I'm not
wreck the
100%
place.
sure. When you emailed me, you were like, "Can you send me my channel?" I was like, "Oh God, is he gonna subscribe?" I say a few non-politically correct words. Oh yeah, are you a Mac?
Oh, here's a great question. Can you tell us the story of the Pyrofx co-founder that dropped out twice, college, and how he managed to succeed? That's me. My co-founder Mike has a PhD in mathematics and computer science. He does category theory mostly, a little bit of quantum computation, that kind of stuff. He's a really great dude, and he's very brilliant in a lot of ways, much more brilliant than me. I was at Carolina for 3.5 years, dropped out of Carolina to go build the internet for, help corporations get on the internet back in the mid 90s. About 10 or 15 years after that, I went back to college, went to George Mason, was there for about 2.5 years, dropped out when I got to the point where I had everything that I wanted and wanted to go build stuff again. I view education as an opportunity to learn the things that you need to learn in order to go build the things you want to build, right? I'm a builder. I've always wanted to build things. I was the kid that when I was 6 years old, I took the television apart, nearly killed myself with the flyback transformer. And my dad almost lost his mind, right? He comes home and the TV's in 1,000 pieces on the floor. And my mom is off. She's like, oh, I didn't even notice. But that was me, right? I just wanted I wanted to know how everything worked, right? So I took everything apart I could get my hands on. And, when I got a little older, I realized the reason I was taking things apart was because I wanted to put them back together again.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so we have 3 minutes left on the dot. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, so they want to know Mac, Linux, or Windows. What's your go-to? I know you're on a Mac right now, I think.
I'm on a Mac right now. That's typically what I use for laptops because I think, honestly, the Retina display is worth whatever suffering you might have to abide in order to use Mac OS. My desktop is Linux, and it always has been, and it never will be anything else. We have no Windows anywhere in my office, and it's not permitted.
What about at home when you play Fortnite?
Honestly, I play Fortnite on the Xbox.
Oh, okay.
I know that makes me like subhuman. The PC Master Race is totally superior. I acknowledge, but I'm at a point in my life where I can only handle one game at a time, right? So, I sort of feel like the convenience of being able to grab a controller and just game is keeps me in it a little bit, as opposed to having to give it up entirely. If I had to build a PC and find guys to hang out, it would just never happen. I wouldn't.
Do you pass on your skills down to your kids? Are you trying to promote them into software? Or you're just you know what? If you want to be a pilot, you go do that.
Oh man, that's a great question. I'll be honest. I don't really think about it that way so much. I think your kids are going to turn out to be who your kids turn out to be, and you pass interests down to your kids, but it's more genetic. I think in some ways it's more genetic than you realize, right? So here's the example that I give. My dad's family came to the United States in 1635, right? So we've been here 11 generations. I'm generation 12. Starting all the way back in the early 1600s. And in that 400 years, we've only had 2 jobs, right? We've always been either farmers or engineers. That's it. So, I don't think that I have to pass interest in engineering down to my kids. They're going to find their interest in engineering because they're they're sort of born to it. That's just the way that they're going to be. What I pass down to my kids is I try to pass down a work ethic, a set of values, and an understanding for how they interact with their community and that kind of thing. Because I think that's ultimately what's really important, is to teach your kids why what they're doing, what their interests are important to the people that are around them, so that they can be productive members in society, that they can contribute something really meaningful.
That was a great answer. Okay, so that's basically it. We are out of time. Can we get some emojis, some thank yous? Nash, thanks for coming on. It's been real. I have some ideas.
You're very welcome.
I noted some things down on my little whiteboard here while you were answering questions, but we'll talk after this. Yeah, so thanks so much for hanging out with us, guys. He's a wizard. I try to not be the smartest person in the room. If I am, I'm in the wrong room. And so that's why I like talking to Nash so much, because it makes me feel unintelligent, which is also good because it makes me uncomfortable. If I'm uncomfortable, then I'm growing. And so I hope he has provided some value to you guys. I mean, I'm over here getting schooled the whole time, so it works for
man,
me.
you nail it. That's exactly my attitude. Try to find a room where you're not the smartest guy so you can learn something. Amen.
That's my whole mode of living. But I'll just give some shout outs. Twitzer, Roger Steele, Adrian. We got Bud the Pit, Macoder, Jacob, Andre. We got Proxonics.
Find a room where you're the richest guy.
Anthony, Happy Turtle, Christine. Who else was in here? Travis Powell. Thanks, guys. Oh, Bitcoin Jake. I'm trying to scroll up. JK's here. McSheffis, Captain Splash. What's up, date? Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. This will be uploaded. I will change. Oh, Shiloh, what's up, dude? Hello, Discord emoji coming out soon. Yeah, please make some Discord emojis of us. That would be fantastic. If we could just have like a Nash emoji that we can spam when someone says something they don't understand, and we'll just spam a Nash emoji. Like, well, we don't understand.
Fat Pepe.
We could do that. Let's see. I guess that's it. So I think we're good. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. See you.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah. So